Matt Riddle in TNA, Bloodline faction getting a new permanent member. Plus, we're going to talk about some very cool news with the WWE and the indie scene. It's all coming up right here on the Ango Show. All right, guys, so let's kick things off with WWE and the Indies. We know that they got the WWE ID program, which is obviously a really cool thing that's being worked on. We're still learning a lot of the details on whether or not their talent could work for AEW or whatever it may be. But one thing that is really interesting is that Dave Meltzer is talking about WWE stars being able to work more indies going into 2025. Now, obviously, we don't know if this is Dave Meltzer just speculating. We don't know really what to believe when it comes to Dave Meltzer. But there is something that needs to be talked about here because WWE is actually having more and more talent work more and more indie shows. We obviously know that Lyra Valkyria is going to OTT. We talked about that in a separate video just the other day. We obviously saw JD McDonough and Finn Balor do the same thing. But a lot of people are wondering, why would WWE actually be doing something like this? Why will their talent be able to work more indie shows? And I think there's a couple reasons for this, and I kind of wanted to talk about it in video form. The first one being WWE ID is a big question mark. A lot of people often say, and I've read this in the comments, people are saying, well, look, WWE is just trying to monopolize indie wrestling. However, if for some reason that were to become a big problem, and let's just say it comes to like a legal thing, I do think WWE can use the argument, hey, what we're trying to do is build the independent wrestling scene, and look how we're doing so. Not only are we giving talent contracts an opportunity to, potentially get to the WWE one day, but we're also sending our stars to these independent wrestling companies in order to help them grow, sell tickets, and stuff like that. Which I don't know anything legally, of how that would all transpire, but I do think it would actually look good for WWE in their defense if that were to be the case. And I think for WWE, you should be involved in the indie scene. I think it's actually a really good look when you see some of their talent being at certain indie promotions. Now, granted, not everybody should be at just a random rinky-dink, indie show, but there's some prominent indie shows out there. And I think if there's a WWE talent, for example, who could potentially work a show at Deadlock, not only is that great for Deadlock Pro Wrestling, and it could help them move tickets, but it also looks good for WWE because that is something that they typically didn't do. And I do think, we're seeing it with GCW, we're seeing it with a few other ones. WWE is clearly building relationships in the independent wrestling scene, and it looks good for WWE. It doesn't look like the Vince McMahon era where typically everything is just, no, you can't do this and you can't do that. A little bit more freedom. Now, one of the risks to WWE talent working indies is the fact that they could be prone to injury, which obviously takes them off TV and could hurt WWE. So I think you're going to see WWE do it more in 2025, but I think you're going to see certain stars obviously not being used for, a variety of reasons. And I think WWE is going to try to protect their investments as well, but they're going to try to balance it out by also being involved in the independent wrestling scene. Okay, guys, Bronson Reed, we obviously have seen him involved with the Bloodline stuff, but everybody wants to know exactly what is happening here regarding his future with the group. And a lot of people are wondering if this means that he's a permanent member, if this is just for Survivor Series. Now he did an interview with WWE La Previa, and basically he addressed this and he says, I feel like me and Solo have a similar game plan. For me, it's not only about helping Solo win and having these new guys win, but I want to be in the main event scene, and so does he. I feel like I can control Monday Night Raw and he can control SmackDown. So we have a bit of an agreement here where he might not be giving me necessarily orders, but we're thinking in the same vein. Then he was asked about whether or not he'd be joining the group permanently. And he says, at the moment, I consider myself a bit of a mercenary. If someone has the right game plan or the right amount of money, I'll help them out. But as far as something long-term, that's something we'll have to see what happens after Survivor Series. Now, this is actually really interesting for a variety of reasons. If you guys don't remember when Triple H brought back Bronson Reed, we saw him involved as a mercenary for The Miz. And now he is the mercenary for the new Bloodline. I actually like this idea where Bronson Reed is kind of like the mercenary in WWE. He is viewed as a threat. He is viewed as a very big deal. And I like the idea of top talent requesting his talents to help them get the win. And eventually I would like to see that mold Bronson Reed into the main event scene. He's been doing some really cool stuff this year. His reactions are like the reactions that he's getting are a lot better and a lot more positive, and people enjoy watching him. Triple H, he did the right thing with Bronson Reed. He did a slow build. You know, he brought him back, and everybody's like, why isn't he, you know, he's not getting over. Why is he not getting over? That just goes to show you Triple H's experiment was actually right. Give it time. Let him do his thing. Let him show the world what he can do. And then from there, people will be able to decide if they like him or not. And obviously now we have gotten to the point where people genuinely do like him. So Bronson Reed in this particular situation, he's, you know, involved with the new Bloodline storyline. Like, this is a really big deal. And I think what would actually be really cool with the Bloodline not necessarily being on Raw, because there is a brand split, they could do a lot of storytelling where Bronson Reed does maybe eventually take orders from the Bloodline, maybe to go after Jey Uso on Raw or CM Punk on Raw or whatever it may be. And I think if WWE were to do that on television and explain it properly, it could be a really cool thing. So maybe not being like a permanent member of the group, but being affiliated with the group and helping out the group when it calls for. I like WWE revisiting history and using that to tell a story. And I think that could be something that they do with Bronson Reed moving forward after Survivor Series. Okay, guys, Matt Riddle was a last minute replacement on TNA Turning Point. And, you know, look, a lot of people are going to have their own opinions on Matt Riddle, but he made his debut at TNA. If you guys have TNA Plus, then you guys were able to watch it. TNA was at WrestleCade, and Matt Riddle was in a 6-man tag match because Trey Miguel was not there due to travel complications. Now, with that being said, a lot of people are wondering, I'm seeing this on Twitter, I'm getting asked this, people are messaging me, they're like, hey, is Matt Riddle joining TNA? Now, just keep in mind, this was not the original plan for TNA. TNA's original plan was not to have Matt Riddle join this match. There, as of right now, has not been an agreement between TNA and Matt Riddle moving forward. However, with that being said, I think that could very well lead to a possibility where Matt Riddle is in fact involved in TNA moving forward. And I think we could get to a point where if he does join TNA, they will probably put him at the top of the card. Now, I don't know if I necessarily want to see Matt Riddle in TNA. Matt Riddle's kind of doing his own thing elsewhere, but obviously we'll have to pay attention to it and see what happens. But you just got to keep in mind, this was a last minute thing. This was a last minute replacement. It is what it is. Obviously, TNA was trying to work with, you know, the fact that there's travel complications. Now, East Coast is starting to get some pretty bad weather and stuff like that. So these types of things will happen. The reaction to Matt Riddle's TNA debut has been somewhat positive. And obviously, this could lead to talks for the company if they do want to bring him in permanently. Just keep in mind, there are people that show up in TNA and they kind of do like a per appearance thing or a short-term agreement. They don't necessarily always go into a long-term contract. So that it is something that you can potentially see, you know, and obviously we'll see kind of what happens. But yeah, for those who are interested, Matt Riddle's in TNA. Is it going to be a long-term thing? I don't think so. Not going to get hopes up, but you guys can let me know what you think down below.